2311 Racing might be merging with Front Row Motorsports. Chris Bell is not happy with Kyle Larson's comments that he made to the media earlier this week, and Josh Berry is going full-time with Junior Motorsports for the 2022 season. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to another video. We've got a ton of NASCAR stories to discuss here today on the channel. Let's go just jump straight into those very, very quickly. We're going to start off with PJ1, as this weekend at Michigan, PJ1 will be not used on the racetrack. This weekend, instead, they're going to be using the resin and the drag tires that they use from National Super Speedway. The resin they use in National Super Speedway, in my honest opinion, actually provided a lot better racing than I thought it was going to be. Yes, Kyle Larson dominated that event, but what I will say is that resin actually worked. Now, again, it is National. National is different than Michigan International Speedway, so it may not have as good of effects on it. Again, I like that they're trying something a little bit different, and they're not bringing PJ1 to Michigan, even though, again, Michigan, let's be for real, the racing has not been really great there, but I'm overall glad that they're changing up a little bit and bringing a different compound than they have been using at that racetrack. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Armani Williams. As Armani Williams will be making his Truck Series debut this weekend at Gateway, driving the number 33 for the Williams brothers. For those of you who do not know about Armani Williams is the first NASCAR driver to race with autism. A lot of great things to get into the sport, and I love that we're seeing more of this coming into the sport. People that come from different backgrounds stuff that are able to come into the sport. So really cool to see that Armani Williams getting an opportunity. I will say he's probably not going to have a really good run, though, just because the Williams brothers equipment really is not that great. They don't have a lot of speed, so I'm not expecting really overall a great run for him in his debut. But I'm overall wishing him the best of luck and good luck in his first. I've had a lot of respect for this guy, and I'm wishing him the best of luck overall to go out there. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we are talking about Sebastian Arias. As Sebastian Arias will make his NASCAR West debut at Irwindale, driving the number 5 for Bill McAnally Racing. For a lot of you who don't know who Sebastian Arias is, Sebastian Arias is a Colombian race car driver who's been making his way up through the ranks. I believe he'd be the first Colombian driver to race in NASCAR since, I believe, maybe Milka Duno or Juan Pablo Montoya, I believe the first or second driver to make that debut from South America. So it's really cool to see that Sebastian Arias is making his debut. He's in a really good car. Again, I'm not exactly how he's going to do, because sometimes Bill McAnally cars can run up front, or sometimes we see the cars struggle, but I do think that he has a really strong opportunity to run up front. I'm wishing him the best of luck, and good luck to Sebastian Arias in his ARCA West debut at Irwindale. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about J.J. Yeley. As J.J. Yeley will be racing at the BCS 39 Nationals this next weekend at Indianapolis, driving number 51 for Rick Ware Racing. This really doesn't surprise me. J.J. Yeley is running this dirt race. We've seen a lot of NASCAR drivers that are already running this event. I believe Kyle Larson is running this event. Chase Elliott's running the event. Conway Daly's running the event. I think a couple other, also Ryan Newman, I think, is also running this event as well. This race has been attracting a lot of racers from different backgrounds and different racing series to come over and race. So it's really cool that J.J. Yeley is getting an opportunity to racing in this event, and it's really cool to see he's going to get another opportunity. I'm wishing J.J. Yeley the best of luck. I think he has, honestly, a really good shot at contending for the victory. Wishing the best of luck to J.J. Yeley in racing this event. Hopefully he will run really good for the Rick Ware Racing organization. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we are talking about Chris Hacker. As Chris Hacker will be making his official Truck Series debut at Gateway this weekend, driving the number 34 Williams Brothers Racing. Now, for a lot of you who need a little bit of background on Chris Hacker was actually supposed to make his Truck Series debut, I believe, at Charlotte in the number 41 for Dawson Cram, but unfortunately, he was not allowed to say anything, and unfortunately, things kind of went through with that. But I've been really wanting this guy to have another opportunity to race. He's been teasing us for a while that he was going to be making his Truck Series debut, so he's finally going to get that opportunity to race. I'm definitely wishing the best luck to Chris Hacker. Again, I don't really expect much again. He did run ARCA early to Charlotte, actually finished in the top 10 for the Dawson Cram Racing organization, and really, really well for the Cram Enterprise organization. So you really never know what he's going to do. I'm wishing him definitely the best of luck, and hopefully Chris Hacker is able to run really, really well in the event. It'd be great to see a driver that I've had someone that I like a lot, get an opportunity to run really, really well in that event. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Darlington Raceway. As Darlington Raceway has been repaved in Turn 2 ahead of its Southern 500 Labor Day weekend. Now, I saw a lot of people getting really mad about them repaving Turn number 2, but literally the track has been coming apart. If you watched the races this past weekend, there were a couple red flags that really took place, I think during the truck race, due to basically the track coming apart. So I think NASCAR is making the right decision to repave it. And They're not changing the geometry. They're not changing the compounds and all stuff they're using on it. They just had to repave this again. If the track is literally coming apart, they're making the right decision. A lot of people get really, really mad because they see a repave happen, and really not every time you see a repave is it a bad thing. So it's not bad that they're doing a repave, especially when the track is coming apart. So in my opinion, I think it's a great decision overall that they are repaving Darlington Raceway, and I think it won't affect the racing overall. We'll have to wait and see what happens, but it's good to see that they are repaving Darlington Raceway. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we are talking about Conway Daly. As Conway Daly has said during the speaking media for the IndyCar race, he spoke to Bob Poggers, and he said he has had talks with Nice Motorsports to run more races later this year, and would love to get into a NASCAR Xfinity Series car once again as well. Backstory on Conway Daly. Conway Daly actually has one NASCAR Xfinity Series start when he drove for Roush MA Racing. I think it was at Road America, if I'm not mistaken. He didn't run really that great. I think there was, again, that 6 car 2018 was extremely cursed. They really were not running up front. But when he ran the truck races for Nice Motorsports, he's honestly done pretty surprisingly well. He's ran up in the top 20 a lot of times. He's had some issues, course throughout those races. Again, sometimes it takes open-wheel drivers a little bit more time to get compatible to these cars. These cars are heavier than the Indy cars. So I really want to see Conway Daly come back and race a little bit more. I think Conway Daly, as a guy that has a lot, would be really cool to see him run a couple more races for Nice Motorsports, especially if it does come available. I would assume Vegas definitely has to be in the cards for maybe to run later this year, especially I think IndyCar is the end of the year is not that far away when the Vegas race happens. So hopefully we'd see Conway Daly run some more races going forward. I'm definitely hoping he gets to come back, because I think it'd be really cool to see Conway Daly make another attempt in NASCAR Truck Series. Now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we are talking about Indianapolis Motor Speedway. They said during the post-race media that they mentioned that the issues with the road course will not have an impact, and both sides were pleased with how it unfolded besides turn 6. A lot of people were basically speculating in regards if they were thinking about moving this race back to the Oval, and it looks like that is not going to be happening next year. Now, if you did watch the Indy road course race, really up for the first 80 to 85% of the race really went straight forward. But around 5 or 6 laps to go, Martin Truex Jr. spun, and basically that caused calamity when basically the curbing literally started coming up. The splitters dug into that curb, and literally 10 or 12 cars wrecked. And a lot of people were really not wanting this event to come back due to those situations. NASCAR should have thrown the yellow, in my opinion, when it came to that situation, because it could have been extremely dangerous. But I'd like to see this event run one more time with some adjustments to the track course. I think that there should absolutely be some adjustments to the racetrack for it to be better. But I like to see them run this event again next year and try it out one more time. Even though the end of the race was a disaster, it does not negate the rest of the racing. And the finish overall was really good. So we'll talk a little bit more Chase Briscoe and Denny Hamlin a little bit. But we will probably be back in Indianapolis road course next year. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about the new road course policies that started this past weekend. NASCAR announced for the NASCAR Xfinity Series race that they have a new policy in regards to wet weather. They said if NASCAR considers the track wet, restarts will be single file going forward. Now, before the race took place, said there was a 10% chance of race, there really was no chance of rain affecting. A lot of this is due to the fact of what happened at Circuit of the Americas. Basically, if you watch the races at Circuit of the Americas, it rained pretty much throughout the whole entire race. There was a lot of spray that was being kicked up by the tires, because the tires, at the end, they have a little more technology than they need to do when it comes to the tires. But they basically were kicking up a lot of the water as spray, and unfortunately it was causing like a foggy condition where drivers really couldn't see, and they were going fast and slowing down. We saw 2 really massive wrecks that took place. The first one being Chris Bell, Kevin Harvick, Bubba Wallace, and Ryan Blaney all got involved in the first one. And then the second really big incident, which is where everything kind of took place, Martin Truex Jr. ran in the back of Michael McDowell, and then Cole Custer just rammed into the back of Martin Truex Jr. Again, I think that this is the right decision, especially when it comes to visibility. If you're going to have visibility problems, I think that this is the right call. I'm glad that NASCAR at least is taking a little bit of step where they have said that they were looking at maybe trying to change up some of their wet weather racing, especially with how crazy and chaotic it was. So I think overall it's a really good decision that they've decided to do that. Again, fans are probably not going to be happy because you can potentially get half spray that comes up. But once they went to single file at COTA, it ended up fixing itself a little bit. So I think overall it's the right decision to fix the road course policies, and I think it's a great decision overall, to be perfectly honest with you. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we are talking about Alex Albon. As it was reported by Christopher D. Hart, I believe, that he said that Alex Albon was speaking with a couple of 2311 personnel, and he's spoken to quite a few teams this past weekend throughout the paddock, whether it's in NASCAR or IndyCar. Alex Albon to 23.11. That's something definitely really, really interesting. Now, for a lot of you who have not been following Alex Albon is a driver that was in Formula 1 last year. For a couple years, he drove for the Red Bull organization. Originally, he was at the AlphaTauri organization, where he got promoted up to the, I think it's AlphaTauri, or I can't remember exactly what team it was, but he was at one of those organizations, and he got promoted up to Red Bull in substitution for Pierre Gasly. Pierre Gasly was struggling, and Alex Albon basically took over. Now, Alex Albon lost his right at the beginning of this, before the beginning of this year, due to Sergio Perez basically taking over for him, and Alex Albon has been in the search of looking to race. He's been in the DTMs and stuff. Now, currently, from what I've heard in the silly season in regards to IndyCar, apparently he's maybe in a question to be testing maybe a car for Andretti potentially, but he's been speaking to a lot of teams, and he'd like to come over here and race in IndyCar as well. Now, how likely do I see Alex Albon racing in NASCAR in 2311 racing? I'll be honest, I think it's very unlikely that Alex Albon would race in NASCAR. Apparently, he's not been a big fan of racing in the DTMs. He said he's not really been a big fan. He would like to race in open. So I think Alex Albon is more likely to go over to IndyCar and race in open wheel racing again next year, or maybe in like the sports car as well, than racing in NASCAR. I just don't think he's as big of a fan of the close cockpit stuff. So I don't think Alex Albon is very likely to go over to NASCAR. But I think it'd be really cool if he did decide to come over to NASCAR. I think it'd be really cool to see a driver like Alex Albon bring that representation from different countries. I think it'd be really, really cool, and hopefully we'll see a lot of good things. Because, again, I think it'd be really cool to see Alex Albon come over and race in NASCAR, too. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Romain Grosjean. As Romain Grosjean said, he never said never to both NASCAR Cup Series racing and dirt racing. Romain Grosjean, I would love to see him come over to NASCAR. Now, Romain Grosjean has had a test recently, and he'll actually be racing in the IndyCar Series at Gateway as well. Now, how likely to see Romain Grosjean coming? I think there's potentially a chance we could see Romain Grosjean racing in NASCAR. I really think that there's a good potential opportunity that we could see a driver like Romain Grosjean come over to NASCAR. Romain Grosjean, like I said, I think a driver that raced in Formula 1 last year. He basically decided to come over to IndyCar. He's been racing this year for Rick Ware Racing. So, think about Bristol Dirt. He mentions dirt racing in NASCAR. What about the Bristol Dirt race? Maybe running in one of the Bristol Dirt cars. Because, again, like I said, he's very interested in dirt racing. I'd like to see Romain Grosjean maybe the Daytona 500 as well. I'd like to see a driver like Romain Grosjean take different opportunities, come over to different styles of racing. And I think it'd be really, really cool to see Romain Grosjean get an opportunity to race. I think it'd be really cool overall for sure for him to get an opportunity to race. And in my honest opinion, it'd be really, really cool to see him get an opportunity to race in NASCAR. I think it'd be really cool to see that for sure. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we are talking about Kyle Larson once again. Kyle Larson won this past weekend the 60th Knoxville Nationals, the 2021 Knoxville Nationals. He had to hold off a hard-charging Donny Schatz to score the victory. Donny Schatz sent it in the last corner really, really hard, but it was not enough, and Kyle Larson was able to pick up the biggest sprint car win ever of his career. Kyle Larson was extremely happy. He was in tears. He was excited. He was jumping up for joy. He was extremely happy to win the Knoxville Nationals. Now, Kyle Larson this year has done so many great things on and off the racetrack. 5 Cup wins this year. Should probably have a lot more than he has, but 5 Cup wins so far. Has won the Knoxville Nationals. Has gone out there and won the Kings Royal. Has won the Prairie Dirt Classic. Has won the Chili Bowl. Has won a ton of different races this year. This has been one of the greatest motorsports seasons for a single driver. It's very hard to compare him to any other driver currently racing because he's entering so many different events. But what he's doing out there has been absolutely exceptional. And it's very difficult for a driver to pull off every single one of these wins. And the fact that he's done a lot of these wins in just this year has been absolutely impressive. And we've witnessed something this year that has been absolutely incredible. And the fact that he's been able to do what he's been able to do this year has just been phenomenal to watch. So huge congratulations to Kyle Larson on picking up the Knoxville Nationals win. Is a big win for him. Probably the biggest win of his entire career. I know he's won big races in NASCAR with the Coco 600, among other things. But the fact that he's able to win the Knoxville Nationals is really, really incredible to see. And congratulations to Kyle Larson on picking up his first ever Knoxville Nationals win. He's been close to winning, and it's great to see that he was able to pick up his first career Knoxville Nationals win. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we are talking about Sam Meer. He spoke to the media recently that he says that he plans to go full-time with Junior Motorsports in 2022. He's just waiting on the sponsorship currently at the moment. We'll talk about Junior Motorsports here a little bit in regards to Josh Berry, but Sam Meer is already been confirmed to go full-time with Junior Motorsports. Now, the big question is, What number is he going to take at this point? We're not exactly sure what number he's going to take because the 8 car is basically off the roof right now. Where is he going to go with him? I assume that Sam Ayers probably either end up in the 9 car or he's going to end up in the 1 car full-time next year. I think Sam Meer is a really good driver. I know that the first 2 races this year have not been really, really good for Sam Meer, but you look at Sam Meer, what he's been able to do, and not so great equipment. I mean, he drove Brett Holmes racing trucks and almost contended for wins, especially at Richmond. You look where he had to start at the back and almost got up to the front, almost contended for the victory. He was really, really fast in that event, and I've seen him do a lot of great things this year throughout his time, whether it's in ARCA, whether it's in NASCAR, in the Truck Series, even in the Xfinity Series. I've seen a lot of great things from this kid, and this kid has a really, really awesome and a really bright future ahead of him, and I really hope that he does get to go full-time. It's basically confirmed he's going to go full-time, so the big thing is, what will he do next year? Will he run up front every week? The question is, how will he do it? I think that Sam Meer will be a very, very fast driver next year. I think he's a really, really awesome driver. He's got a lot of talent, a lot of potential to be a NASCAR Cup Series champion one day. I really think he could do that, and I think that Sam Meer is going to continue to do a lot of great things, and I think we're going to see a lot more out of this kid going forward. He's a very awesome driver. And now we're going to go ahead and talk about Josh Berry. Josh Berry is officially confirmed that he will be driving the 8 car full-time for Junior Motorsports in 2022. Sponsorships and other things have not been announced at this current moment. But let's talk about this. Josh Berry going full-time with Junior Motorsports. This is absolutely earned, in my honest opinion. You look what he's been able to do, not just with Junior Motorsports, but with Rackley War Racing this year and other organizations. Josh Berry has contended for wins with Junior Motorsports. He has 1 career win in the NASCAR Xfinity Series at Martinsville, which he had the best car in that event, by the way, was the best car in the NASCAR Xfinity Series field that day. He had to had to beat hard charters like Daniel Hemrick and Ty Gibbs for the victory. He was able to hold on and win that event. Not to mention, you go back to Darlington where he was contending for the win. Dover where he had arguably one of the fastest cars, if not the fastest cars in the event. He was really, really quick in that. And looking at the Truck Series for the early portions of the Knoxville Truck Race, he was honestly dominating that with the Rackley War equipment, which you've watched Timothy Peters run that car early in the year. He was struggling. Josh Berry's been really, really fast at that equipment as well. It's really good to see a driver earn the win, earn this ride, especially with what he's been able to do on the racetrack. And there's been talk for a while that there have been sponsors like Tire Pros that have been wanting to work. I would assume Tire Pros is probably going to be the sponsor that ends up getting it, probably the ride sponsor that would work with Josh Berry. But I am so happy that Josh Berry is officially going full-time in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. I've been wanting this guy to have a full-time opportunity. It sucked that his time at Junior Motorsports really came down. He actually ran up one off for Michael Annett because Michael Annett's been dealing with his injuries on his leg. But I'm really happy to see that Josh Berry is going full-time. It's really, really great. Now, the big question is right now, we just talked about Sam Meer a little bit. With Sam Meer going full-time and Josh Berry going full-time next year, what overall happens with Junior Motorsports? Because you have Michael Annett who drives the 1 currently, and you have Noah Gragson in the 9 with Josh Berry getting confirmed at the 8, and Justin Allgaier is not going anywhere anytime soon. What overall happens to the Junior Motorsports camp? Now, apparently there is a very potential chance that they may go to 5 cars next year and keep the organization and put Sam Meer probably in the 88. So that would be Michael Annett in the 1, Noah Gragson in the 9, Justin Allgaier in the 7, Josh Berry in the 8, and Sam Meer in the 88. Or there's potential they only have 4 cars next year, and I think that the person who will get booted is probably going to be Michael Annett. I know Michael Annett's been dealing with some injuries recently, but if you look at his performance except 2019, he has been very underwhelming. He missed the playoffs in 2017. He may miss the playoffs this year as well. Again, it's unfortunate circumstances for him to miss the playoffs this year, which is why he unfortunately will end up missing. But I mean, honestly, to be perfectly for real, I think Michael Annett just hasn't performed really that great. So I think the person that will end up getting booted is Michael Annett. You look at Noah Gragson last year, won a couple races. So I think if they do choose to only go to 4 cars next year, I would say Sam Meer probably in the 1, Justin Allgaier in the 7, Josh Berry in the 8, and Noah Gragson. I think that's how it's going to go if that's the way it ends up happening. But I'm so happy that Josh Berry is getting an opportunity, and I hope that he will do really good next year, as I think he deserves an opportunity to continue racing here in NASCAR, and he deserves it. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we are talking about Ryan Newman. Now, Ryan Newman spoke to the media before the green flag dropped, and he says that his future is still uncertain at the moment. He says, I really don't know. I don't know. I'd be interested in running full-time with the right team and the right people, but I don't know what there is available for that. I'll be perfectly honest with you about Ryan Newman's future. Ryan Newman will not be running full-time with Roush next year, as Brad Keselowski is going to be taking over the 6 car. Now, Ryan Newman does have a potential option if there's no really good full-time rides available to go to Roush Racing next year, which I think would be a really, really good move, especially since Steve Newmark would like to keep Ryan Newman in the organization on a part-time basis, maybe bring him as an engineer basis as well. Why not keep Ryan Newman in your organization? But if he wants to run full-time with an organization next year, I think his options are very, very low. We'll be talking about front row in a little bit as well in regards to them in 2311 Racing, but the only other option I think that Ryan Newman has is going to be Kaulig Racing. Now, Ryan Newman does bring some funding. He does have some funding backing him, and he's a guy that can attract sponsors into the sport, so he could definitely go over to that organization. But I'll be for real with you in regards to Ryan Newman. I think his best option is going to be running part-time at Roush Racing. I think that's really going to be his best option. One, he's still going to be in the same organization. I assume he has the potential of getting the same crew chief. We're not sure on that. But I would think that Ryan Newman would be benefit from running part-time next year. Pull the Billy or Terry Labonte, and that's really not a bad thing to do. I get that Ryan Newman wants to continue racing full-time, but you look at his age as well. Ryan Newman is going to be 44 at the end of this year. He's currently the second oldest full-time Cup Series driver behind Kevin Harvick. So to me, if I'm Ryan Newman, I take the opportunity of running part-time next year. I think that's a really good option for him, and I think he should run part-time next year, in my honest opinion. I think it's going to work out for him in the long run. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to be talking about the wild Daytona 500 rumors. Corey LaJoie was talking on Stacking Pennies about some schedule changes, and he says that the Daytona 500 may or may not be the first points-paying race of the 2022 season. This really would surprise me if the Daytona 500 would not be the first race next year. And I'll be honest with you, the more I've thought about it, the more less likely I think that this is going to happen. We've heard some wild rumors in the past that have not come true, including the next-gen dummies. But, I mean, look back in history. NASCAR used to be, back in the day, they used to not run the Daytona 500 as the opening race. They used to run out in the West Coast, run at a track in like Riverside or race it like Ontario Speedway back in the day. And then eventually they moved the Daytona 500 to the opening race of the season. But it would just feel a little bit different if they moved the 500 past it again. The thing is, if they do move the 500, though, past the first race of the year and move it actually to the second or third race of the year, what track ends up getting the first race? I think it would go to a track like Sonoma. I think Sonoma would definitely be the track to move up. A lot of people have been wanting Sonoma to be earlier in the season. And you look at Sonoma during the spring and like late winter, and it looks absolutely gorgeous. The grass is green, the grass is beautiful, and a lot of people have been wanting Sonoma to be early in the year. We go to Sonoma in June, and it just looks so drab. It just looks so bad. And I think personally, if we were to move Sonoma, if we were to move the Daytona 500 second race of the year, I personally think that should go to Sonoma Raceway and open up on a road course too, and that's really what we used to open up with Riverside Speedway. So I personally think if we do move the 500, it'll work out. But again, I don't want the Daytona 500 to personally move past the first race of the year. I think Daytona 500 should be the opening race of the year. It gets fans' attention. It gets fans growing. And you maybe could put a little anticipation and promote Daytona 500, but I think it makes a lot of sense. Again, if they are to move it, I would assume that they would start the season a little bit earlier. And also that could be a little benefit too, though, is that if they start the season a little bit earlier, they can end the season a little bit earlier as well, maybe like late October. So maybe that's what they're trying to do. Maybe they end the season a little bit earlier. There's just been talks with the schedule talks that they may end the season a little bit earlier. Schedule's not expected to come out till, I believe there's potential that the schedule may not come out to early September. So we'll have to see on that what happens. But there is potential that the Daytona 500 may or may not be the opening race going into the 2022 season. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Erik Jones. As Erik Jones told the media recently, he says he feels things are close to being done for him to remain at Richard Petty Motorsports for the 2022 season. He has said that before and ended up not seeing a deal not getting done, so he wouldn't say it without feeling good about it getting done. Erik Jones currently drives for Richard Petty Motorsports. He's driven for them so far in 2021. He has not really overall had a great year, to be perfectly honest. If you look at his on-track performance this year, and he's absolutely struggled on the track with only 4 or 5 top 10s. But I do think that a lot of that has to do with the fact that Richard Petty Motorsports, with them losing a lot of their sponsorship this year, I do think that has had a major, major effect on the performance this year of the team. Them having to get sponsors on a week-by-week basis and not having like a major sponsor backing from like a company like Worldwide Technology, not sponsoring NASCAR really anymore, even Bubba Wallace now. I think that has affected Richard Petty Motorsports. I think Erik Jones is a very, very solid driver, and I think he does deserve an opportunity to go back. I think at this point, though, he will return to Rich Petty Motorsports. I think a lot of the reason why they had not signed him officially, re-signed him yet for 2022, was the talks to him potentially going to Toyota. Because remember, there was talks of Rich Petty Motorsports may switch from Chevy to Toyota, and there have been talks maybe they bring someone like the Joe Gibbs Racing stable over there, someone from the Toyota stable over to that team. Well, over the last couple weeks, it has been reported by Jordan Bianchi that probably is less likely and not likely to happen anymore. So I think that they are going to re-sign Eric Jones, and I think at this point they should keep Eric Jones. Maybe they will benefit a little bit. I think they would benefit from going over to Toyota, to be perfectly honest with you, but I think you have a good driver in your stable, and you don't really want to end up getting rid of a driver like Eric Jones. So to me, I think it'd be the right decision overall to keep Eric Jones in the organization, and I think it'll be a good and better move overall to keep in the organization than not keeping overall in the organization, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we are talking about Chase Briscoe versus Denny Hamlin. Now, if you watched the end of the NASCAR Cup Series race that took place this past weekend, during the last couple laps, the restart got really, really chaotic. Chase Briscoe got a little bit of pressure from A.J. Allmendinger, and he went into the grass and came back side by side with Denny Hamlin. Now, I think that Chase Briscoe felt like Denny Hamlin did things wrong, but if you look at the replay, Chase Briscoe basically got forced out by A.J. Allmendinger and not Denny Hamlin. Well, he gets told that he has a stop-and-go penalty, and he apparently does not get issued the message from the team, and he literally runs into the back of Denny Hamlin and turns him. So instead of Denny Hamlin winning the race, basically he loses the race and finishes like 22nd or 23rd in the event. Denny Hamlin was not very happy with Chase Briscoe. Now, if it was any other driver, Denny Hamlin probably came up to him and kicked his ass. But basically because it was Chase Briscoe and he has a good relationship, and a lot of drivers have respect for Chase Briscoe out there, Denny Hamlin and Chase Briscoe, while the conversation got really, really heated, it looked at the conversation at points also ended up being pretty civil overall. So here's my thoughts on the situation. Chase Briscoe is in the wrong. Chase Briscoe absolutely should not have punted Denny Hamlin. Denny Hamlin did nothing wrong. I've seen a lot of people say, oh, Denny Hamlin forced him off the grass, forced him off the racetrack. But if you look at the replays that took place during that event, Chase Briscoe did all of it wrong. He literally turned Denny Hamlin with the penalty. So really, he turned Denny Hamlin basically for no reason. And I just don't understand what Chase Briscoe is doing. He says he didn't do it intentionally. I don't think Denny Hamlin said the same thing. I don't think he maliciously tried to turn Denny Hamlin. But I feel like Briscoe said, I wouldn't race anybody like that. But you literally dumped him, and you got told you had a penalty. So I really don't understand that. I mean, it's kind of frustrating to see that what Chase Briscoe did. And I really have a lot of respect for Chase Briscoe, and I really like him. But I thought that was 100% Chase Briscoe's fault. And I saw a lot of people saying that was Denny Hamlin's fault, but Denny Hamlin really did not do anything wrong, in my honest opinion. So personally, I think that hopefully this transpire to more issues. Honestly, I don't think so. I think that both drivers will keep it clean and stuff. Hopefully things won't. But we need rivalries in the sport. Maybe there's a little bit of a rivalry forming, but I don't think there's going to be much of a rivalry over this. I just wanted to talk about the incident a little bit more and get my thoughts out about it. So there's my thoughts on the situation between Chase Briscoe and Denny Hamlin. And now we're going to jump on to the first of two major stories of today's episode, as we are talking about Christopher Bell. Now, Christopher Bell spoke to the media once again this past weekend, and he says he is not happy with Kyle Larson's comments about him responding. Bell said Larson sent a short apology text. Sorry, hate, I spun you at midnight after the race. And Bell read it in the morning and figured if Larson wanted to talk, he would have called. Now, to give a little backstory on the situation in regards to Christopher Bell and Kyle Larson were in a pretty good battle at the end of the race. They were battling for the win at Watkins Glen. There was a three-way battle between Mark Truex Jr., Kyle Larson, and Christopher Bell. Kyle Larson basically sent it to the inside. Now, before what happened was Kyle Larson got blocked by Christopher Bell, like a really, really super, super aggressive block, and nothing had transpired by that. Christopher Bell was trying to defend. Christopher Bell tried to make it through. I think it was too wide. Larson tried to make it through, but Bell basically came down on him and basically blocked him. A couple laps later, with around 35 laps to go, Kyle Larson had gotten to the inside. He was literally on the curb, and Christopher Bell literally came down on him, and basically Kyle Larson got into Christopher Bell, locked the tires up a little bit, but Kyle Larson got into Christopher Bell and basically spun him. Kyle Larson then went on to Sirius XM NASCAR Radio and basically called out Christopher Bell, basically saying he really felt like that both of them were kind of at fault for that a little bit. Kyle Larson just said apologized to him, but eventually he changed his mind and kind of said what Christopher Bell basically not calling him was a little bit childish and kind of a little bit bad. But Christopher Bell responded to this. Now, I want to talk about this. There might be a little bit of rivalry for them. They're supposed to be buddies. They're supposed to be friends. But in my opinion, I feel like Christopher Bell is being extremely childish here. Christabel, you weren't really in the wrong, dude. I like both these drivers a lot, but I feel like Christabel was extremely in the wrong right here, especially since Kyle Larson was literally on the curb. Where's he supposed to go? In the grass and damage the splitter on the car? No, he really had nowhere to go, and yes, he locked up tires and got into you. I don't think he meant to wreck you. It was not intentional, and you're acting like, in my opinion, you're acting like it was an intentional wreck when Kyle Larson really did not intentionally try to wreck you, so I don't understand why Christabel is mad at Kyle Larson still. I just hope these two can get it sorted out eventually in a race. I believe that Kyle Larson recently was supposed to drive a sprint car race for Christabel, so that's really interesting. But, I mean, in my personal opinion, I think that, honestly, if you look at it, I think Christabel has been in the wrong in the whole situation. Look, I look at this for two ways. Maybe this will create a form of rivalry, but I think they're being a little bit childish about it, and I hope that eventually they get their stuff sorted out, because I think, personally, I think Christabel was in the wrong. Christabel literally came down on him. Kyle Larson got up to him. And I don't blame Kyle Larson for that. I also don't understand why you don't respond at least saying something to him. I think you should have at least responded to Kyle Larson. I really don't understand why he went ahead and did not respond to him. So, personally, if you want my honest opinion, I think Christabel's been in the wrong in the whole situation. If you ask a lot of the media members, if you ask a lot of people, they're going to say that Christabel is the one in the wrong, that Kyle Larson's more in the right again. And there's also going to be Kyle Larson haters that are going to say Kyle Larson is in the wrong, but I personally think that Christabel's in the wrong. It's not just because of bias, because I'm a huge Kyle Larson fan, but it's because I think that Christabel was more in the wrong than Kyle Larson was, and the fact that he didn't respond to him was absolutely ridiculous. So, hopefully things can get sorted out between these two, and we get to see these two race and become good buddies and good friendly rivalry continue once again going forward. And now we're going to jump on to the final major story of today's episode, as we are talking about 2311 Racing. Bob Pockrass reported that there may be a partnership that is forming and emerging that might be taking place with 2311 and Front Row Racing. He says that they might be merging with Front Row Motorsports. He first said, do you have a deal going on with Front Row for each other? He says, I don't have any deals with anyone right now. We're still working through it. It's week by week, to be honest with you. This is really, really shocking, to be perfectly honest with you. This kind of surprises me as well. Now, there have been people that have said that apparently Front Row wants out, but Michael McDowell wants to return there, so I don't think Front Row overall wants out. But this is really, really shocking, the fact that there may be a merger taking place between 2311 and Front Row Motorsports. We know that currently at the moment right now, that 2311 Racing is wanting to expand to maybe a 2 or 3-car operation. Now, my big first question is, what happens? Does Front Row end up going over? Does Front Row end up selling their organization overall? Or does this like a charter situation where Front Row gets to keep one of the charters and they basically sell the charter to 2311 or lease the charter out to them, and they have like a major partnership? Do they end up having a big partnership right there? Is the big question. Does Front Row downsize to 1 car next year? Or does Front Row go over and completely sell and send it over to 2311 Racing? Now, I think that what I think personally is going to end up happening, if this does end up coming to fruition, if this ends up being the final decision on what is going to happen, I think that 2311 could end up buying out all of Front Row Motorsports. I really think that can end up happening. And if that's the case, what happens to the 2 drivers currently running at Front Row Motorsports? I think Anthony Alfredo is unfortunately out. I think if he would end up leaving the ride, I think that he would not be back. I don't think Anthony Alfredo's not had a great year this year, and I think that they're going to want to put some guys from the Toyota organization in there. Michael McDowell going over to 2311 Racing, I think that might be a possibility, but I know that Michael McDowell and Bubba Wallace have had a history. Look back at last year at the Bristol All-Star Race. They had issues during that event that really caused them to have a little bit of feud. Bubba was not extremely happy with what happened. I don't think those two really get along. They've also had issues earlier this year. I think in Nashville as well. I think Bubba Wallace kind of got spun by Michael McDowell in that event as well. So you got that. You really have that going on too at the moment. Now, I think what ends up personally and another big thing too is that I think that this also will mean that 2311 Racing will end up, again, if they do end up buying, I think that Front Row also ends up switching to Toyota. I personally think Michael McDowell remains at Front Row Motorsports. Personally, I think he wants to remain at Front Row Motorsports. Again, if they do merge, I think we could see the 3-car team being Kurt Busch, Michael McDowell, and Bubba Wallace. Kurt Busch, I think, is going to 2311 Racing next year. I think we'll end up there, to be honest. I think Kurt Busch, again, we've heard multiple reports that Kurt Busch is most likely going to end up going to 2311 Racing next year. And I think that it would be a really good move for him to go over there and start up an organization, especially with Chip Ganassi Racing getting bought by Trackhouse and Ross Chastain and Daniel Suarez going over to Trackhouse next year. it's basically he's going to end up at 2311 Racing. We're just waiting for the announcement. But this overall really shocks me. NASCAR silly season has definitely been really interesting. And the fact that you have now this report coming out, and not the fact that, because again, a lot of us thought that maybe they should go over into the Rick Ware route and basically buy a charter out for them. But it's really interesting that they're interested in buying a single charter from an organization like Front Row Motorsports. Again, we've seen some big moves this year in the NASCAR silly season, and the fact that there's potential that we could see 2311 Racing merge up with Front Row Motorsports is definitely really interesting. Maybe we'll see more of this come out in the future, and really cool. I like to see 2311 as fan. Front Row's definitely had their biggest year so far. You look at Michael McDowell winning Daytona 500, having 5 or 6 top 10s. Anthony Alfredo hasn't, like I said, been really that great this year, but they've had their ups and downs throughout the season, and you look at this team overall, they have a bright future ahead of them. And 2311 is looking to make some really big moves. I just hope that Front Row Motorsports can continue. And I think if they do flip over, they will end up being a Toyota team. So we'll have to watch and see what happens going forward. But there is a very strong possibility that Front Row will be working with 2311 going forward. So anyway, that's it for today's NASCAR news video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel to be notified when a video does go live on my channel. Follow me Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Support page for all links below for that, and comment your thoughts on today's video. Do you think this merge is going to happen between Front Row 2311 or not? Let me know in the comments below, and let me know your thoughts about the Christopher Bell and Kyle Larson video that is continuing on. Let me know in the comments below. Anyway, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's video, and I'll see you guys next time with some more great and awesome NASCAR content. Take care, everybody.